This episode is sponsored by Arana Stay, the digital guest guide of the future. Say goodbye to the hassle of traditional welcome packs and say hello to a seamless and unforgettable digital experience for your guest with Arana's fully branded guest experience app. Boost your revenue with powerful features and focus on what you do best, whilst Arana Stay takes care of the rest. Visit aranastay.com to find out more. Okay folks, welcome back to another episode of the Accommodation Show. This week I'm joined by the amazing, the wonderful, the gorgeous Amber Hurdle. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Bart. I love being here, and I love that I will now be sending you a check to Australia to thank you for making me feel pretty today.
It's not hard to do at all. It really isn't. And folks, Amber is an absolute legend. My first introduction to you was in Miami. I had never heard of you in my life before. I had no idea who you were. And you are a lady that likes to make an impression. This was at the bookdirect show. It's kind of before the show starts. Everything's kind of quiet. The lights are dimmed. And then the music gets going. Dancers come out. And then Amber Hurdle makes her way to the stage to do a presentation at the bookdirect show. This was my first, I've been to the US before, but my first real kind of experience of this. And I was absolutely blown away. So first off, thanks for that introduction. Second off, what prompts someone to jump in and do that kind of an intro?
Well, so my version of branding, which is from a statistical standpoint, the way that branding is done by everyone, or the best practices for everyone post-COVID, is just how I've always done it. And that is creating emotional connection. So I knew that there would be a big contingency of international visitors to Miami. And so I was like, okay, well, Pitbull's from Miami, so we got to play a Pitbull song. And then, what else is Miami? Well, like Latin dancing. So, we really broke our necks to find just the right Latina dancers and get on the same page as them and really come in to make a point that everything that you do in your business, every choice that you make can move your customer towards an emotional connection with you or move it away. Now, I guarantee you, you move towards, obviously, because we're friends now. But some people that probably also turn them off. Like, what is happening? It's 9:00 in the morning. Like, I was out late last night. There's dancers everywhere. There's Pitbull and people are dancing in the aisles and on the stage. And they're probably turned off by it. And that's the point. Because the way that I brand, I want you to land on my website or look at my collateral material or experience me in a sales conversation. And I want it to be a hell no or a hell yes, like that, and move on.
Yeah, amazing. And I think that most brands that actually we think about, it is actually like that. And we're going to come back to all of this.
Yes.
Because today's episode is all about branding. And what's great about this episode is that I find that you're an absolute legend of branding, right? I don't even call you an expert. You are branding, right? That's the way that you live and the way that you are. So we'll come back to the branding part. Sure. But what I'd love you to do, for those of you, or for those of the audience that haven't heard of Amber Hurdle, I would love you to do us a bit of an introduction and kind of tell us sort of your journey as to how you got to where you are right now.
For sure. Well, I always like to start it out by saying I got knocked up at 16 years old. and that's the truth. I was the girl that wasn't supposed to happen to. I was very involved in my school. I had just been on the Channel 4 News in the Middle Tennessee area in the United States. And they featured me along with other students, high school students, at 6 and 10, Monday through Friday. Because we were leaders and we were having these conversations with that, long story. But so I'm such a good kid, I'm on TV. until I wasn't. A couple weeks later, I found out I was with child. So that was such a it's just shaped everything about my life. And so the way that I approach branding is because I had to figure out as a teen mom, how do I get ahead? How do I get an extra shift at the restaurant that I work at because I need to pay for daycare on Monday or my kid's getting kicked out? Like, how do I make sure that I find favor from one of the four jobs that I had to ensure that they're going to be flexible with the fact that I have all these things going on. And if Brittany got sick, I couldn't come to work. Like, how did I position myself so that I could still have opportunity and grind it out and provide for my daughter? It really was life or death. It really was my car being repossessed or not. It really was, I'm not going to have a place to live or not. And so when you have that amount of like pressure on you, you start really getting outside of your normal personality tendencies, and you're in survival mode. And so what survival mode taught me is I had to position myself in the world to have opportunities that I did not actually deserve. So because I didn't have the degree or I didn't have the experience or whatever that was, like all I had was that people knew I was a hard worker, I had great work ethic, and they knew that I was amazing with people. And at the end of the day, when you're in hospitality, which has been the core of my personal work experience, we do more than that in my agency now, but the core of my personal work experience is in hospitality. So if you're a hard worker and you're great with people, you're kind of winning. So taking that and then moving into my more into my professional career, I started just doing things that felt natural to me. Again, it was creating that emotional connection and not making it about like super business, objective type things, but really weaving in stories and opportunities of aligning with nonprofits or, a myriad of things. And eventually I was like, oh, that's called public relations. That's a thing. Like I could go back to college and like get the piece of paper that says this is what I do. So I went as an adult returning student. I got my public relations and advertising degree. I got a minor in marketing, a minor in organizational communication, realized that my sweet spot was internal publics, and how that impacted the external experience. And so that could be employees, that could be members, that could be fans, that could be alumni. And I just found a lot of success and kept building on that success and building on that success. And I've had a ton of failures too. That's where all the lessons get learned. And so now here I am doing it for lots of different companies. And really, one thing about the VRSTR world is there's just so much M&A activity going on. And, there's companies who are acquiring smaller companies. There are companies that are merging. There's more private equity that got dumped into that world in 2021 than in history. So, we've got a lot of this happening. And so when you're merging cultures and you're merging businesses and you're merging processes, it's like, ooh, there's a lot going on. There's a lot changing, and we're about to lose our staff because of it. So we got to get, y'all, I'm Southern. You got to get your poop in a group. That's a way more genteel way of saying what I want to say, but you got to get your poop in a group. You got to get your team swimming in the same direction. You have to have them bought into their gifts being, used in something bigger than themselves. And if you can do that, if you can see your employees, if you can help them see their value, they're going to crush it for you. And that's as important from a branding perspective as making your customers feel warm and fuzzy, because who's serving your customers, guys? So that's kind of the fast forward version, but that's how I got here.
Wow, look, my brain is swelling. There's just so many different questions that I have for you, and what I find really interesting is we talk about guest experience, right, and how that guest experience goes from all the way through from the start, from sort of any kind of marketing that you're doing or social media and the kind of the dreaming of a holiday phase, all the way through to the booking website, then to check-in or the pre-check-in emails and communications, and then the check-in and then the stay, and then the process afterwards, and that whole guest experience part. And what we all know is that it needs to be holistic. It needs to stick itself together. Otherwise, the journey doesn't really make sense. Right. And what I want to talk to you about today as well is that brand. Okay, so that branding, It needs to make sense not only externally to people, but internally as well, with all your people, your culture, and everything that you do. And I've seen some unbelievable property management companies and unbelievable hotel companies as well do this incredibly well. Just really understand that it's not just about all those kind of external communication points or the nice things in the room, that you need to align your brand as a business and as a leader to kind of tie it all together.
100%. Bart, you just hit the nail on the head. And if you think about, like, we spend, we'll say a more scaled company. I mean, a super small company will, not super sure about this, but a more scaled company, like you have a decent number of employees, you have an annual revenue of a certain amount. It's highly likely that on your P&L, the biggest chunk of your expenses is your people. So that could be payroll, that could be benefits, that could be taxes, that could be professional development, that could be, lunches and events and things like that. Like, I challenge you, as you're listening or watching this, go see how much of your operating budget is for your people. But then here's what happens. We're like, let's go get market share. And so we dump all this money into marketing, and we're trying to gain market share, and we want to retain our customers, but then we don't do anything. You talked about that whole customer journey. We don't do anything financially or energy wise to invest in the employee journey that starts the second they even are aware that they want to work for you. And it ends only when they part ways with you. And so what does that journey look like? And are you treating your employees in the way that you want them to treat your customers? That's the question. And if you're not, then you're probably not going to have a good customer experience. You're going to have churn not only in your employee base, but you're going to have churn in your customer base. And then you're dumping all that money over here and worried about your tech stacks and all these other things, when if you get the people part right, they'll deliver your brand promise for you.
Yeah. Amazing. And look, so let's rewind a little bit, because sure. I wanna get some of those foundations set up, because if we've got scale, we'll have done some branding some branding pieces. If we're still getting, if we're getting to scale as well, there's some foundational elements that we can set up. And those branding elements can tie into both more sales, more revenue, but also then tie into the company and the company culture overall. So tell me, like, when you're thinking about brand and when you're thinking about, where to get started, what are the key things that you would impart on people?
First and foremost, your culture is the birthplace of your brand. There is no expression of your business, which my definition of business is you have a problem, I solve your problem, you give me money. That's business. But how do we do that? How do I know that I want to do business with you and not Joe Schmo down the street? It's because how you do business with me is how you prefer to do business. And there's values that align, and there's different emotional triggers. Like, I'm an Amazon girl. I don't care if they're taking over the world. I don't care if they're listening into my house. When I ordered a rug yesterday, I got it today. I'm happy. Convenience emotionally drives me because, as you know, my life is crazy. Mm-hmm. So we've got to start there. And if you're a small business owner, you need to think about that as your constitution, and you're the president. What is your constitution going to say? These are the things that we value. And so that's mission, that's vision, that's values, that's service standards. I know that you have so many people in the hotel world as well as the STR world. And like, you can think of the Ritz-Carlton, you can think of Marriott, you can think of Gaylord Hotels, that what their team knows to deliver on the brand promise is when somebody's within 10 feet of me, I'm going to look them in the eyes and smile. When somebody's within 5 feet of me, I'm going to speak first and last. That's one example. You can go to Ritz-Carlton's website and check all of those out, but that ensures that there's a consistent brand experience. So without that, how do you deliver a consistent brand experience? If you're not telling your team, like, come hell or high water, here are the 5 things you have to do in order for all of us to be delivering this promise, I don't know how do you even navigate that? How do you maintain a consistent brand experience? So once you have that down, now we have to understand, okay, well, what's the personality of the brand? What is it that we want people to believe about us? Because a brand, all that is your reputation. So when you think about Nike, just do it. Hard hitting athletic brand. You're thinking of like aggression, but not negative aggression, like
Yeah.
positive, like empowering aggression. And the thing about it is Nike's brand never changes. But if they are selling or marketing to a performance athlete, like a competitive athlete, performance gear, that's a whole different conversation. Tone doesn't change, personality doesn't change, but the messaging changes if I'm going to talk to a competitive athlete versus a soccer mom wanting to wear cute athleisure wear so she can pick up her kids from school, go to soccer practice, go to youth group, shop at Target, go to Pilates, whatever that is. She doesn't want to hear about shaving a second off her time. She doesn't care about, the technical part of the fabric. Do I look cute and will this wash well? The end.
Yeah.
So when we're thinking about our brands, it's okay, now that we know what our constitution is, now we understand how we're going to collectively make sure that we're being consistent delivering this. And then who are we marketing to? Who are we serving? Do you have competitive athletes and soccer moms both? Great. Then we have to segment those audiences to talk to them in a way that's emotionally compelling to them. Once you have that, then it's like, okay, then what is the message? Like, we know what the message is. Now what's the tone? So no matter if you're internally handling your marketing, you hire a social media company, you're working with a website team, you should hand them your Bible of your brand, not go down the discovery path of XYZ company and then XYZ company has a different discovery and now you've got 5 different interpretations of your brand. Bag that, you're in charge. Tell them what your brand is. This is the tone. And when I say fun, this is what I mean by fun. Not I'm going to leave it up to your interpretation of what fun means to you because words have connotations. So we just keep going down that and we keep massaging that until we get to the employee experience. And then it's a whole other thing. Well, how are we communicating? What are the communication channels that we can count on? What are the type of events that they can count on? How are we getting feedback? Do you have a two-way feedback mechanism? How do you know that everybody has the tools and resources they need to get the job done? And as you grow and the further away your senior leadership gets from that front line, that's where the president and the vice president and the Constitution starts getting a little bit murky because now we've got all these people in between that hopefully have been fed and are culture focused and are focused on their personal brands, delivering the employer brand in a compelling way so that the employees with the employer brand happiness are then delivering the business brand as expected by your customers. That's a lot. I hope everybody was taking notes.
No, that's amazing. And look, that's the great thing about recording this is that people can rewind and re-listen to it. And I think it's absolutely critical to get a piece of paper and a pen, or to use a tool like ChatGPT to transcribe this and to get the bullet points. Because you've delivered kind of like almost like a masterclass in branding in a couple of minutes, just going, hey, from top to bottom, these are the things you need to think about. And I encourage everyone who's starting to think about these to do more research, to learn more, and to think about it. I think today what would be really interesting is to try to empower people to make some positive steps from wherever they are in their particular journey right now and the things that they need to think about. If we go back to establishing the Constitution and your voice, there's going to be 2 questions that I have. But the first one is, you'd always say, you should start straight away and you should do it. And I would say, for someone that's just getting started or starting building their brand and their vision and that thing, yeah, just do it. The issue is, right, I've got 101 other things that I need to do, and I've got no money because my business is struggling. I'm starting to grow. I just need to get some properties on and that sort of thing. So we're limited on time, right, to do everything. And we also might not even know what it's going to look like completely. So what are your best words of advice in terms of, how much time someone should take? What are the sort of the basic bits that they can start to work on to create something a little bit bigger later on, particularly when they don't know what it's going to be?
Yeah. Oh, so good. So I've hospitality in general, but specifically in vacation rentals, I've helped birth brands and I've helped rebrand and I've helped evolve brands. and it can be done in a day. That's how we do it. We give some pre-work and then we show up. We're like, get your Ritalin, get your coffee, get some protein bars. Let's go. Like, we don't have time. To your point, we just don't have time to willy-nilly around. So my urging to you is, if you're a brand that is brand speaking new and you don't, maybe you have like one property that you own, or you're that person like so many in the industry where it's like, well, I was marketing mine well, I took it away from, this terrible property management company, and then my neighbors were like, what are you doing, can you manage mine? And before you know it, oops, you have a property management company. So if you're that person, then take a step back and go to, even just your family and say like, well, what do we value? What is important to us? What are the guiding principles in how we make decisions? And I'll tell you, I'm trying to think, who was it on LinkedIn? I want to get the person right. So Venturi has this, they've got this series that they're doing on LinkedIn right now.
Yes.
And Brooke is asking like, what are the, so, but I'm trying to remember the person that they.
Oh, there was a person within the post. Yes. Yeah.
And so I know Steve Trover's done it. Anyways.
Alex O'Husner has done it as well.
Yeah, Alex had a great one. But the property managers across the board have said, I wish I would have known not to take on every property that I could. I wish I would have been more discerning about which homeowners I do business with. And so how do you make that decision if you don't understand what you value? Because what happens if you don't create, like, why are we in business, your mission, where are we trying to go, your vision, and what is it that we value? How do you know what direction you're going, and how do you know who is eligible to share in your values to be on board? So we serve so many different masters in the VRSTR industry. And so you've got your homeowners, you have your staff, you have your guests, and then you even have your community and your regulatory boards. That is, that's a huge part of even being able to express your brand in your community, to keep it safe from ultra regulation, because Airbnb is like unhinged, so like, we're not Airbnb, like, we are a family owned business who's been contributing to this community, and these are the things that we value. And so you can trust us that we're going to keep our community and the goals of the community in clear focus. But if you don't have a brand and a culture, how are you ever going to communicate that and fight for your right to do business in your community?
Yeah. And so on that, so how often do we review this? Because for us with iBooked Online and the Accommodation Show and all the products that we're doing, it feels like a 6-month sort of period is a good time for us to review everything that we're doing, and just going, you know what, we're not quite where we want to be, and we're not, like, even identifying our audience and who we're talking to, that's kind of adjusting and changing as times evolve, as things change, as market dynamics change, i.e. you put a pandemic in the mix of it, and all of a sudden the people you're talking to actually changes. The people that we were talking to at the very start, completely different, because those people have sold their businesses and kind of left the industry, and they're not as interested in being educated. But then you've got all this new wave of people coming in, so we do have to constantly be reviewing. I imagine as a short-term rental company, that's one thing. As a hotel brand as well, I mean, you're not going to be changing that often because you've already got a bit of scale. What is your advice in terms of looking at things and thinking about whether whatever you wrote at the start still rings true?
Yeah, I think you should audit that annually at least. If you are going through massive growth, then yeah, 6 months, every 6 months kind of check in. You don't want to change it too often though, because then it's like, okay, team, memorize these new values. Like, you want to try to stay close to the knitting, but to your point, when things do change significantly, that's a time to take a step back and say, do we need to put an amendment on this Constitution? And I mean, that societies evolve and businesses evolve. And in the hotel space, like, yeah, they are a little more established. They might have been around a lot longer, but listen, that M&A activity is going there too. And there's entire private equity firms that are buying old hotels, retrofitting them, turning them into something new, selling them, moving on. So you kind of have like this culture that's changing. Your culture is the same, but it's going to show up differently in the different zip codes, both geographically and theoretically. Of like, okay, well, this hotel is in Las Vegas, and so that vibe is going to be a little bit different. We're going to have that going. We're still, getting it ready for sale. And then, we just acquired this in Utah. Well, those are different markets. Those are different types of employees. Those are different everything. So you have to have your sub brands, but then you have the parent brand, which is the employer brand, that then gives and informs, how are we delivering the service no matter who our customers are. So it's an ever evolving thing that you have to stay on top of. But definitely once a year when you're working on your annual operating goals and you're working on your budget for the new fiscal year, also take a look at your culture and your employer brand strategy. I mean, you should, I hate that word, let me back up. The people who really get the value of the full pull through from personal brand, employer brand to business brand are the ones who not only put together a marketing strategy and a marketing plan with tactics to support the strategy, they also put together an employee engagement plan from their recruitment marketing to their onboarding, to their engagement, which is the majority of the time. Are you recognizing? Are you providing professional development? Are you making sure everybody has the tools and resources to do the job? And then also the offboarding. In hospitality, we deal a lot with on-call and seasonal workers. Are you staying in touch with them throughout the year? Or is next Christmas in the hotel space, are they going up to the retailer because they could make $1 more? When if you would have just sent them like a newsletter or opt them into a text thing upon exiting where they're saying, yes, I want to stay in touch with my employer, just like, hey, great news, we just won this award. It's because of you. We hope we get to see you back this year. Like, emotional connection much? I'm going with my family, not this place over here that's probably going to be miserable, but I'm going to make $1 more an hour.
Yeah, absolutely. I've got... There was 3 things that you said, and I've just been trying to hold on to them. You said business brand, personal brand, and employer brand. Yeah. We've kind of been talking a bit about employer branding. The business brand is probably more consumer facing and what consumers should expect. Mm-hmm. The personal brand is one which is I find quite contentious. Yeah. Because some people don't want to have themselves as the center of their brand, which I don't know whether they have to or not, which we can talk about. Mm-hmm. Some people don't want to be on Instagram. I just did a presentation yesterday to a group of 100 people, and maybe I said, who here likes to do social media? And these are all the hospitality professionals, right? People at the top of their game. Maybe 4 of them said, yep, I like it, or I'm okay with it. Most people just don't want to be doing it. Mm-hmm. And obviously, I'm getting into the weeds a bit as to the practicality of building a personal brand. I'd love to spend a bit of time talking about personal brand because you're so effective at using a personal brand to build your business. So I want to talk about that and the advantages of it. And I've seen some great examples of within hospitality and accommodation of people leading the brand. I don't want to talk about Musk and stuff. I want to talk about our sort of our vertical. So I would love to kind of so there's that, but then also if we don't want to be that person, what are our options? So if we can kind of deal with those 2, I think people would really benefit.
So first and foremost, whether you want one or not, you have a personal brand. Personal brand does not equate Instagram famous, LinkedIn icon. It doesn't have to even externally facing. So the thing is that your personal brand, this is Jeff Bezos, founder of Amazon's definition, but your personal brand is what people say about you when you're not in the room. We all have one of those. And Carl Jung, I'm going to butcher his version of it, but philosopher Carl Jung says, you can tell the world who you are or they will make it up for you. So your choice. And so what we want to do is we want to make sure that whether you are leveraging your personal brand to generate sales like I do, or you're leading your team internally and trying to build influence and trust so that engagement increases and turnover reduces, either way, you've got to be clear about what people believe about you. And so if you know that authentically this is who I am, and then this is how people perceive me. If there's a gap in between those two things, then we need to make sure that we're strategically taking action, surrounding ourselves with the right people, putting ourselves in the right opportunities so that we have the chance to show people who we are at our core and what we value. So that same kind of branding experience is the same thing. So let's just back up a little bit and say, I am a business owner. So, we can talk about, Alex Husner and Annie Holcomb. Okay, so they both worked for regional companies, or more regional companies. They had, I think, a little bit of a national presence, and they really worked their personal brands to benefit the companies that they worked for. And then there were some changes in both of those companies. So at a certain point, they have built up their brand by their podcast, by their active involvement at conferences, by their networking, by their social media presence. They put themselves out there, and we all believe things about Alex and Annie and their podcast. And now they have a top hospitality podcast. They both work for national brands. They're both fulfilled. The companies are winning. They're winning. Everybody's winning. And so that's a powerful external example. And then you have maybe somebody a little more subtle about it, but let's talk. I'll give you two examples. So there's Valerie Gangus has Juniper Vacation Rentals, and she's great about putting herself out there, but she doesn't have a podcast, things like that, but she is using that to draw awareness to Juniper. And then you have Robin Cragen of Moving Mountains out of Colorado. And that's a great brand. Like Forbes talks about, they're the best luxury vacation rental company for skiing in Colorado. They've got growth going on. And he also doesn't have a podcast. He's not, writing articles for Forbes. They're covering him. But what he is doing that really impacts that brand is he is active in the VR space. He shows up to conferences. He does speak on panels. He ensures that his team understands who he is, and he makes sure that his team, and Heather too, his wife, they make sure that they see their employees for who they are. So now they're building trust internally too. And then they get voted best places to work, which then makes it easier for them to recruit. And then that's why they have such an amazing customer experience, and Forbes and all these other national publications are like, hey, that's the place to be. But it starts at the top. It starts with Robin and Heather doing their jobs as business owners to ensure people understand what they're about, what matters to them, how much they care. And when that trust is built, everything else falls into place.
I love it. I love it. And I think from what I'm hearing you say is that personal brand, it helps you build expectations holistically across your company, across your team, so you get a lot of advantage out of it. So you can get better employees, you can create that alignment. You've got if everyone's rowing, they're rowing at the same pace in the same direction rather than in different ways.
And why are we on this together right now? Why were you on my podcast? Because what I believe about you from my limited exposure to you, like you said, we just met in October, but let's be honest, there was 2 conferences in there, so we had a lot of exposure in a short amount of time and then stayed in touch. But like what I believe about you, through you not telling me this, through me not reading a bio, I know that you're cutting edge, avant-garde, which I appreciate because I value innovation, tech focused. I am a tech junkie. I know that you're kind, you're fun to be around, that you genuinely care about people. I watch how you interact with other people and how you light up just because you have the opportunity to engage with somebody. Like, that's my kind of person. So your brand is on brand for me. So I know I can trust you to be me and to have an experience with you that I can count on. Now, not everybody's that way. It's like hot and cold. You don't know how they're showing up that day. You don't really understand what drives them. And so you can't really trust them. And, you're not going to break your neck to help them be successful because you don't even know what they're about.
Yeah. And I think that's been something that's been quite conscious from my perspective, is to be quite revealing of who I am, so that when people see me, they go, if I'm going to do business with someone, I say, don't trust me, just have a look at what I'm doing and why I'm out there. And I'm super vulnerable in that way, because also if I'm not being genuine, or if I'm not delivering to my promises, then it's out there, it's exposed, and people can see it. I want to move on to something, because one of the things that happens between me and you is we start talking, and then the time just goes like that, and then there's just so many questions that I'm left with, and I'm super cognizant of the fact that I want these episodes to be as impactful as possible to as many listeners as possible. And one of the things about this branding stuff that we're talking about, which I think is a big struggle, is, okay, great. I think a lot of people understand where we're at. But now when it comes to getting more bookings, when it comes to actually interacting with potential guests, there's different schools of thoughts, and I actually have my own opinion, but I want to hear yours first. You actually have more experience in this. In terms of what we're showing to a customer from a leader's perspective, I'm not talking about company brand, I'm talking about individual brand and what we're showing our customers. What's good practice? What do we need to do? Do we need to do it? Do we need to show all of our customers who we are? Where does the personal brand sit within delivering to customers or guests?
For the way that I do it, it's not the way, it's my way. And listen, that's marketing, right? Like, you're a marketing guru, you get it. Like, not everything's for everybody, and you have to understand your customer. So if you are a very transparent brand, and you want to tell the brand story, then yeah, put that front and center. Like, this is us. We're a family-owned business. We're third generation, whatever that looks like. And then you would weave that through your storytelling and that emotional connection through all of your content, on your website, in your email sequence, in your onboarding. If you have a guest guide, like a touch stay or something like that, then you'd want to put that, like, these are our family's favorite restaurants around here. Weave it in throughout if you are built on brand intimacy. If you're not built on brand intimacy, then that might feel invasive. Like, I don't care who you are, and please, dear God, no matter who you are, don't put your family pictures in where somebody's vacationing. They don't want to see your kids. Okay, so just get that out of the way. A rookie mistake. I'm like, you always know when you're in a professionally managed vacation rental based on what you see in the home. But that there is a place for you, for your team. I would say pull back the curtain about 15 to 20% in your content and show your team members, highlight your housekeepers, talk about so-and-so just got a new dog, and this has nothing to do with your next stay, but we knew you would love it. Like, if you know that your audience is a certain generation, they're from a certain area, you can make general assumptions that, it's a pet-friendly location. So yeah, we're going to show our dogs. Pull back the curtain enough to create that emotional connection, but not so much where it's all about you and not about your customer. Everything should come back to what's in it for your guest, first and foremost. So what is it in for your guest if you show behind the curtain? They know that you care about your business. They know that your employees are hungry to serve. They know that you care about your employees. And so the assumption is, if you take care of your employees, the employees are going to take care of your guests. So it's a win-win-win, because then your employees are also like, ooh, we're getting highlighted. It's recognition, which is one of the top 2 ways to retain your talent, is proper recognition. So I guess my answer is, first, it depends on exactly how much you do. And second, like, rule of thumb, 15 to 20%, pull back the curtain. That could be the owners, that could be the team, that could be your mascot, whatever it is, but just show, what does it look like behind the scenes?
I love it. I think that what it epitomizes this is that it helps to build trust, right? Mm-hmm. So they go, oh yeah, I trust this particular person. So you can trust in a brand or logos and images and that sort of thing, but trusting a person is a lot easier. Mm-hmm. One of the things I want everyone to take away from what Amber just said is that you're thinking about your guest and how all of this relates to them. And as long as you're meeting that criteria and you're going, well, the reason why you want to deal with me or that, because I am this kind of person and it's relevant to your stay and to your experience, then you can definitely do it. And I think that the thing that, I guess what I was saying, what we're talking about as well, because you've got the business to business sort of side of things, and you've got the business consumer. And I think that part there, quite often I find that there's experts that come along and they say, you've got to build your brand and people need to see you and you need to be on all the social media, which is something that I disagree with wholeheartedly. I
Disagree
think
with you.
that not all brands have to be built in that particular way. And I don't, sometimes it can be super unhelpful, especially if it's not something that you as an individual, you want to do, right? You need to want to put your brand out in that way for it to actually make sense, right?
And if it's not necessary, like if you think about the Outer Banks as an example, generations of people have been vacationing in vacation rental homes in the Outer Banks. It's just what they do. So they have a much higher rate of direct booking, which is fantastic. But they also don't have to like do as much of a dog and pony show because they've got a reputation that is built generation over generation of happy guests. So like they're delivering and you know, I'm not saying don't be on social media. And another advantage of pulling back the curtain is if you're recruiting, then your candidate can be like, oh, well, what does it look like to work there? Can I see myself working there? Well, I don't see anything except for the commodity of this is a house with this view and yada yada. Like, if I can't see what the vibe is or somebody that I might be working with, then I might go on down the road to this other place where I can envision myself working there. So I don't think anybody's off the hook entirely, but I do think that based on, you know, your direct bookings, your geographic location, the volume that you need to do.
It's such a fascinating topic, and I was actually watching a movie with my family over the Easter break, and I'm kind of diverging a little bit. I know we need to finish, but I want to get your thoughts on this.
Sure.
And the movie was about a writer, and a brilliant writer that could, you know, that had incredible talent, but he was born into the wrong name. His mum's name was known as a writer, but then he was born into the dad's name, so he had to carry that name, and he couldn't do the switch because it wasn't possible at the time. And you needed that switch for him to be able to be recognized. So even though he was a talented writer, the name was what carried in that reputation, that and the lineage as well that kind of came from that. And I find that that's quite interesting, is that when we think about, you know, back in the past, it was your surname and your family name that would be your brand, right? That was your brand. You were born into the brand of whatever that family has achieved or
Yeah.
known for and that sort of thing. And I think that's quite relevant, right? Is that it takes a while to build a brand, and you're kind of creating legacy, and people recognize you for being a certain way or having a certain reputation. What are your thoughts?
I wholeheartedly agree. And I hang on to my Sicilian heritage because it is so much of who I am. So I feel like the minute I say, like, oh, I'm Sicilian, that comes with some markers in and of itself of identity. You know, I'm female, so I have to carry my ex-husband's name because that's fair. But SEO, man, SEO. Amber Hurdle won the awards, wrote the book. Like I can't get rid of it. It is what it is. I got 10 years wasted in listening. So from a brand perspective, that is
Uh,
my stage name.
uh,
But that's not who I am. And so I do think that when we let people into our worlds just a little bit, then we can start making those family connections. We can start saying like, I mean, my daughter is, I mean, not biologically, but she was adopted by my ex-husband. And, you know, she's fourth generation. That's relevant to people in the land industry because you're not some whippersnapper who's jumped on the bandwagon. And this is very true too in STR right now, because like, look at the bandwagon that people like this year we're experiencing, you know, flooded markets, you know, too much inventory because everybody wanted to get into the space and they didn't even really understand what they were getting into. They just thought it was some cash cow. And so how do you differentiate yourself from Joe Schmo who has 5 listings on Airbnb or you whose family has been creating these experiences for generations? There's something about that family name that I think is important.
Uh, I could keep going, Amber. I could really, we could go for another hour
You're right. I
without
live,
an
eat, and breathe
issue.
this. Like I see everything through
But
the lens of branding.
well, what I'll do is I'll hopefully see you in Orlando in a few months' time, and we can maybe schedule some good drinking time, and we
Yes.
can we can we can talk about all these different things. Um, you've created so many things for people to think about, and that's what's really critical about the Accommodation Show.
Yeah.
Is, we talked about STO, hotels and different things, but I can guarantee you that there's different parts where people haven't spent enough time to think about, sit down, go back and go, okay, my branding, where is it? Are we doing all the things we could be doing? I would encourage people to follow you, to get in touch with you if they've got any more questions and that sort of thing. What is the best way for people to interact with
Find me
you,
on
Amber?
LinkedIn. I'm a LinkedIn junkie. It is the water cooler of the vacation rental industry. There's nothing, I've never seen an industry like it on LinkedIn, and LinkedIn's where you go to do business. So I'm terrible at Instagram, so don't find me on that. But go where I do business, and that's LinkedIn. And and I want to add too, like, did we one time in this conversation about branding talk about logos or fonts or colors?
We did not.
Okay, so I'm just going to let that hang out there and let people wonder, why is that? You
And
don't illustrate a book and then write the story. You have to write the story and then illustrate the book. So just keep that in mind, and you can ping me on LinkedIn if you want to talk about that more.
Love it. Emma, thank you so much. I appreciate you and the work that you're doing. I appreciate the fact that you take some time out of your busy schedule. I know how pushed you are for time, so it means an awful lot. I'm looking forward to seeing you in a few months' time, and hopefully we can bring you over to Australia at some point as well when we do some events over here. Thanks again. Have an awesome rest of the day.
You as well. I appreciate you sharing your audience with me and letting me serve them.
Thanks. And for all of you that are tuned in, please make sure that you like and you subscribe. I want your comments below. I want to know what you think about branding, what you've done in terms of branding. Do you have brand guidelines? Do you have principles that you follow? Do you use a personal brand? Make sure that you leave us a review as well if you are on any of those podcasting platforms. Thank you so much. See you later. Have a good day.